This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hey everyone, what's going on? And welcome back to another edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
Well, Josh, it's been 4 years, a wild ride, and this is our final episode hosting the podcast. It's been a long way, but we'll get all sappy towards the end. We've got a lot to get to beforehand. We've got 3 great interviews today. We're going to start with Superintendent Dr. Caputo, who's going to shed some light on what we can expect this fall at Metuchen High School, as well as for next week's graduation. Then we'll be joined by Metuchen Mayor Jonathan Busch to talk about the COVID standing from the borough's standing, and then we'll discuss all the events happening, all the exciting events happening across Metuchen this summer as downtown Metuchen gets busy again. And lastly, we'll also be talking Metuchen High School sports, about all the latest with the baseball and softball team. Some tough losses in the tournament, but great seasons for them. The golf team won the GMC championship. The track team doing really well as well. We'll get into all of that. And lastly, we'll be joined by outgoing principal Bruce Peragallo to recount his time here at Metuchen High School. But before that, for one final time, here are the announcements from Josh Hyman.
Thanks, Eddie. The final edition of the Bulldogs Bark student newspaper for the 2021 school year is under the News tab on the school website. Senior sign-out is this Thursday, June 10th at 9:30 a.m. You need that for graduation in your cap and gown. Textbook collection for juniors is Friday, June 11th, and Monday, June 14th, for freshmen and sophomores. Both will be taking place from 12:30 to 3 o'clock. Designated drop-off areas are listed on the school website. Finally, a reminder to all seniors that graduation is on Tuesday, June 15th at 5 o'clock in the MHS Stadium. Project Graduation will be hosting a post-ceremony event filled with fun activities for seniors from 10 until 2 a.m. at MHS. If you haven't already, fill out the RSVP form that has been emailed to your school account. That's all for announcements.
Thank you, Josh, and let's move on to our first interview with Dr. Caputo. Welcome back to the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
It has certainly been a hectic 2020-21 school year, but we've successfully made our way through it and are set for the final stages of the year. For more, we're happy to be joined once again by Metuchen School District Superintendent Dr. Vincent Caputo. Welcome to the show.
Hi guys, nice to be here.
Thank you for coming in. So what has been the greatest challenge for you throughout this school year? And on the other hand, what do you think has worked best in this crazy year?
Wow, it's a lot. Well, first of all, having programs like what you guys are doing, having our sports programs, having our teachers, I think that when we look back on the year, that will be the greatest achievement, that we were able to open up in the beginning of the year and for the most part stay open the entire year. It's been so important to provide in-person instruction for those students that were here all year, and also to allow the flexibility for those students who were working best from home this year for lots of different reasons to be at home.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some great stuff to have, especially during a hectic time like this. You know, some sort of normalcy to whatever extent you can, and especially having consistency as well. Something like school sports, school programs definitely make the year seem a bit more normal, even if we had to cancel or rearrange a lot of things. And how would you describe and assess Metuchen High School's standing in regards to the pandemic? With it being a few weeks since the last COVID-19 notification, are we getting back to normal?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, from a science perspective, and that's my background, vaccines make a huge difference, right? We saw for the first 10, 12 months of the pandemic how important masking was and distancing was, and people that follow that really reduced the transmission. And our testing that we were doing in our district, which comes to a close this week, that's been so important. But since, the late winter, early spring now, with the vaccinations and the vaccines being so readily available, you just see the cases just dropping dramatically. We've been monitoring our cases all year, and around spring break, we had a couple of bad weeks in a row, but since then, the cases have dropped significantly. We reported, I think, 1 case last week after a couple of zero case weeks. We're on the right track for sure.
So looking forward to next week, of course, for me and Josh and all the other seniors in the class of 21, it is graduation, despite how crazy our senior year might have been. So what are the plans for graduation, including in regards to masking, distancing, and the ticket limit, and what led you to making these choices?
So congratulations to the seniors. I also have a senior daughter, so she graduates on the 22nd, and so I've been kind of following your rise to seniors just like as hers. So it's an exciting time prom and graduation, and she has her senior awards coming up tonight. You guys have yours on Thursday, so it's a really exciting time. The middle school, for the first time ever, is actually going to graduate on the high school in the stadium. We want to do that so we have maximum space. So that'll be on Friday the 11th, and of course your graduation, weather permitting, will be on Tuesday. And if it rains on Tuesday, we'll do it Wednesday. If it rains on Wednesday, we're going to have it outdoors no matter what. That was important for us this year. So we have those two big events for the middle school promotion and the high school graduation. Right now we're doing 5 tickets per at the middle and high school. We did get notification on Friday, and in fact I was just talking to Mr. Peragallo when you saw me out in the hall. There's capacity limits have been dropped. That doesn't mean we have to change our plan. I think we have a really solid plan. At 1:15 we'll be talking, Ms. Acevedo at the middle school and Mr. Peragallo and I will be speaking at 1:15 today to kind of go over those plans based on that late Friday information that we got. Right now, as of 11:30 on Monday, the plan is 5 tickets per 8th grader, 5 tickets per graduate, and that's our plan. We cannot enforce masking outdoors after school hours for parents and guests, and we're going to try to limit the amount of time that the graduates have to be masked as well. We hope to have a new scoreboard in place. It's going in this week, and we hope that you guys will be able to do the hat toss by the new scoreboard. That'll be exciting. If not, we have some alternate plans in place. And it's a big night. It's been a crazy tough year. You guys have just shown great resilience and grit. And as I said, like my own daughter, we're really looking forward. I think maybe we've taken for granted some of these year-end events in the past. And I know you guys and I know us as parents, we're not taking for granted any of these year events, trying to enjoy every moment.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just nice to be able to have a graduation as normal as possible. And like you said, I mean, things constantly change. That's what we've learned over these past 15 months. Like you said, the plans were made for a ticket limit, but then capacity changes were made. So it's difficult to navigate that, but we're just really excited to get to have a graduation and hopefully as normal as possible and hopefully get to have as much of our family there as we can.
Yeah, definitely, Eddie. And obviously it's difficult to predict the science and guidelines from the CDC and the governor, but what are you expecting to see at Metuchen High School and across the district this fall? Will it be a traditional school year, or will it still be, hybrid and online and with masks and distancing?
So I just had a parent advisory meeting via Zoom, and they asked the same question. So as far as we know, right now, as of today, masking is still required. Now, there's a long way between June 7th and September 9th, when students return here to the Metuchen schools. We will be in person. There's no remote option next year. It's fully in person. So that's important for us. So it's important for parents to know early on. It's important for students to know, because there's a lot of students who have been out now, will be a year and a half in September. And a lot of those students are struggling and can't wait to get back. But there's some students who might be doing well with this kind of work from home. And there's going to be a transition period. So it's all in person, no remote option as of now. Things could change, Eddie, as you said. And masking is going to be required as of now, but that may change as more and more 12 and olders get vaccinated. And we'll see where it goes for younger kids after that in terms of vaccinations. But full in person, we expect a regular year. Full schedules for all our teams, all our clubs will be operating. We have some great staff that we're excited that we'll be bringing on for next year. We're planning a week of lights coming back. So kind of celebrate coming out of the pandemic. We're trying to do a night game for all of our fall teams. That'll be exciting. New scoreboard. Trying to really highlight some great things. I think in Metuchen we've managed a lot better than a lot of other places. But we kind of want to take some time this summer and especially next school year to celebrate those things.
Yeah, great to hear. And just like you said, like with the vaccines, for example, we've seen the progression we've seen just in New Jersey over these past couple months, more so than a lot of other states where we've been able to progress back to normal. And now that more 12 and 15-year-olds can get vaccinated, hopefully we'll see a more normal school experience next year. But Dr. Caputo, thank you so much for these past 4 years, joining us occasionally on the podcast to bring some light and clarity to everything going on here in the Metuchen School District.
You guys done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. So when we come back, we'll be joined by Mayor Jonathan Busch to talk about everything going on in Metuchen. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
This is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. Continuing here on the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS, I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
As we approach the summer and vaccinations continue to increase, we are getting closer to the return to a more normal lifestyle. To discuss the latest in Metuchen's COVID-19 situation, as well as what else is new in the Brainy Borough, we're joined once again by Metuchen Mayor Jonathan Busch. Welcome to the show once again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys for having me.
So, of course, it's been difficult to navigate these roads over the past year or so as a mayor in the midst of the COVID pandemic. What has been the most challenging aspect of getting through this past year as mayor of the Brainy Borough?
It's a great question. I think it's just the inability to plan more than, a couple days, or really, in fairness, a couple of weeks in advance. The inability to plan for a community in the way that, things change so quickly, both as they got worse and as they've gotten better, frankly, over these last couple of months. It's been really complicated. I'll give you a quick example. Yesterday, I appeared at the antique car show that we have, once a month throughout the summer, and they were used to be located on Main Street. Now we've asked them to move away from Main Street because we were trying to at the time, back in March, when we were emailing with them, we were trying to say, look, you want to diminish gatherings and all those other kinds of things. But I don't think in March we could have ever anticipated that quite this soon, in early June, we'd be in a position potentially where, people really could gather the way they had if they've been vaccinated. So I think that's just one example of very many that we've had, where you make plans in March for June, and what you imagine June will look like when you're in March isn't anything close to reality. So, and this is a good problem to have at this point, because things are opening up much more, and people are able to be with one another without masks in many cases.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned like the antique car show, but I can think of a few more, such as, prom or graduation, where a few months ago we may not have even been able to have them, and now we're having them without mandatory masks, and it's just great to be at this point in time where, although so much has been lost, although so much has been changed, at least Eddie and I can have a somewhat normal end of the year and graduation. And speaking of COVID-19 now, how would you assess Metuchen's current standings in regard to COVID-19 and a return to normalcy?
So I will tell you that things have gotten much better in Metuchen, like they have everywhere in the state of New Jersey, but it's not gone. It's not gone altogether. Our vaccination rate among adults is we have about 80% of adults who've had at least one shot. So that wouldn't include you two, for example, if you've gotten your shot. This would include people who are over the age of 18. But that's a great number compared to the state, and an even better number when you compare it nationally. So Metuchen has done quite well, but we can do better. Now that we don't have the data yet on people between the ages of, frankly, between 16 and 18 and between 12 and 16, we don't have quite the data and information that we'd like to have on that. But, people of those ages obviously are part of this concept of herd immunity as well. So the more people that get vaccinated, the more, not just that individuals will be able to do based on their inoculation, but also the community overall will be able to do, because once you develop a particular number, obviously we'll be able to do more and more. I think we're doing really well, but again, when I say it's not gone, more people could be vaccinated, number one, and number two, this week alone we still had 4 cases. Now, it's 4 cases as compared to some days where we had as many as single days where we had as many as 16 at different points over the course of the last year. So 4 over the course of a week, I'll take it. But really, we need to get to 0. We've had, I think, as of today, 4 consecutive days with 0 cases. I'll be really excited when we get to 7 days, and each time we extend that streak and we get to a record, I get more and more excited. But look, we have come so far, right? As a community, as a borough. And when I see what Main Street looks like on a Wednesday night like last night, I see the seats in our restaurants filled. I see people getting their ice cream or ices and walking around and feeling like this normalcy to some degree has returned. I'll take it.
Yeah, and definitely just the disparity. Like, you're used to, living in Metuchen my entire life. May and June are usually the times when it seems like Main Street is most active with various events like the art festival and stuff like that, and it was so strange last year not having that and seeing it seem just so barren downtown, and it's quite the disparity this year, and it's great to see that everything is coming back. But of course, for us students, we've all been locked up for the past year or so. We're all, very impatient to get back to normal life. And I think I broached a similar subject with you last time. And while we do want to get back to normal life, we have to do it responsibly. So what is some advice that you can offer to teens to make sure that they act safely and still remain COVID conscious, as you've reminded us that it's still not completely gone this summer?
Well, if you're in high school, and obviously you've got to do this with your parents' permission, but you've got to become vaccinated. You have to. It's just the best way for you to have as healthy a summer as possible. Some people will say to me, well, I had COVID, and so I have the antibodies. It's just not enough, because there's so much science to say that at some point, the antibodies associated with infection diminish. Mm-hmm. And while that may still also be the case with the vaccines, there's still more assurance with the vaccine that you'll be covered, or at least be covered like everybody else who's gotten it at the same time. And there'll be a lot more research to show how long the antibodies stay with you from the vaccine as opposed to when you've had the disease. Now, I recognize that there's a lot out there about the fact that people after their second shot sometimes become ill, right? But it's a good sick, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you've gotten the second shot and you are able to, gain the immunity that obviously, the shot is intended to provide, your body's reaction is a normal course. And if you can prepare for it and you sort of just know to yourself that this is a passing thing, and some people don't get sick at all, right? So, I know a lot of 16-year-olds and others who've gotten the shot who've had no reaction. I had very little reaction, for example. But, it's not a big deal. You can deal with it if that means thinking about your summer and the fact that you can have this assurance that you can walk into a movie theater. You can go to a Mets or Yankees game, right? You can go to a concert and not worry as much as you otherwise would. And if you're wearing a mask, it's less comfortable in the summer, and you have to wear a mask in most places if you've not received the vaccine. So get your vaccine and take your mask off.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially with losing last summer too, I think a lot of people are going to be really excited to, try and make up for that lost time with friends and family and other traditions around town. And speaking of that, what are some exciting events planned for this summer in Metuchen?
So, I'll say that the MDA, the Metuchen Downtown Alliance, is working hard on some events. I know they're scheduling some outdoor movies on the plaza like they used to have, and that's great. Some of them are themed with specific events going on throughout the summer. I know they're planning a really interesting Juneteenth celebration to celebrate emancipation for the African American community, but it's for all of us to celebrate, and that's being planned obviously for June 19th. We've got all kinds of other possibilities, but again, the fact that we haven't had the opportunity to plan, where normally you get your summer events scheduled sometime in the winter, the fact that we haven't had this much time to plan means that a lot of that stuff is being planned right now. So I'll say this, the downtown is thriving. The restaurants are finally getting people to sit in those seats. We've decided to leave New Street one way. And while it's somewhat controversial because not everyone loves that, we realize that it's helping to create a destination effect. And so I think you may not need, for example, a specific event to draw people to the center of Metuchen this summer. I think we'll find naturally that just people wanting to be out and this general, feeling of freedom and ability to roam and feel like things are relatively normal again is going to draw people there, and so that's what we hope.
Well, and it's certainly an excellent sight to see Metuchen thriving once again, getting back to, in some ways, how it was before the pandemic. Mayor Busch, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and we really appreciate all 4 times that you've joined us here on the MHS Podcast.
So is this your last podcast?
This is our last podcast, but the show will be continuing in the fall.
I just want to say this, if I can, for you both. I know, and we've gone through a couple of these. This is the 4th time I've been on this. Is that right? But you guys have done a great job here. I mean, this is a remarkable, frankly, show that you've put on. I can't imagine how few schools actually have this going on, but it is a model for other school districts. As someone who works for school districts for a living, I will tell you this is a phenomenal type of model. You've done a great job. You have a lot to be proud of. And I know you're going to Fordham?
Rutgers.
Are you going to Rutgers?
Yes, I'm going to Rutgers. Are you?
You were going to go to Fordham.
I was considering it. I was in between. I ended up swaying towards Rutgers.
Okay, so that's great. I'm a Rutgers Law School graduate.
Nice.
Not quite the same as undergraduate. How about you?
University of Delaware.
Delaware, great. So we got a Scarlet Knight and a Blue Hen here. I wish you guys the best of luck. You're going to do great in school. If this is any indication, you're going to blow the doors off. So good luck, and thanks for having me.
Well, no problem, and thank you very much for those kind words. When we come back, we'll be discussing Metuchen High School sports, and then be joined by Principal Bruce Peragallo, wrapping up his final school year at the helm of Metuchen High School. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
I'm Josh Hyman.
And this is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS.
Having trouble seeing the board in class? Do you need safety glasses for your school sport? If you answered yes to either of these questions, head over to Optique Unique, the eyeglass store at 406 Main Street in Metuchen. Optique Unique does it all. Not only do they offer eyewear for all ages, they also sell sports-specific safety glasses for kids and adults. Call them at 732-321-2020. That's 732-321-2020, or visit OptiqueUnique.com. Do you want to build character, build confidence, or even build yourself? All that and more can be accomplished at the Black Belt Institute at 23 New Street, right here in Metuchen. Students of all ages have been able to learn respect, discipline, fitness, and self-defense from their experienced instructors for over 20 years. Whether you're an adult looking for stress reduction or know someone young who has interest in Taekwondo, the Black Belt Institute is the place to go. The Institute takes a fun approach at teaching the rules of self-defense, instilling in their students an I-can-do-it attitude. Interested in taking a class? Call them at 732-205-9797 or visit their website at blackbeltinst.com. Once again, that's 732-205-9797 or blackbeltinst.com. The Black Belt Institute, Metuchen's leader in martial arts and fitness.
Despite the difficulties surrounding COVID, Metuchen High School and other schools around New Jersey have successfully completed 3 seasons of high school athletics. Starting with the softball team, they did lose in the GMC semifinals, but it was an amazing year for them regardless. How does the future look for this program?
Future looks great. I mean, it was a great year for them. They finished 16-7. They won the GMC Blue Division. They went a perfect 10-0 in divisional play. They did make it all the way to the GMC semifinals, where unfortunately they did lose to South Brunswick 7-6. But this team put up great fights against the red and white division teams, who are typically the most difficult opponents in the Greater Middlesex Conference. They nearly beat South Plainfield. They nearly beat St. Thomas. Those two teams are arguably the 2 best in the conference when it comes to softball historically over the past few years. They also had a big win at home over JFK. A lot of big wins against a lot of big programs. They also put up a nice fight against Monmouth Regional in their NJSI AA Central Jersey Group 2 playoff game. But looking at the actual players, they are going to be losing 2 seniors, Annika Frick, Noel Leaf. Both had great years as outfielders. Frick is the number 2 pitcher behind Abby Kozo, and that's going to be a tough shoes to fill, but there's so much talent on this team, and it's so young, too. I mean, Abby Kozo is going to be a junior next year, pitched so well, triple-digit Ks. She was also top 5 in the entire state of New Jersey in hits. Brianna De La Fuente, 6 home runs, 32 RBI, 30-plus runs driven in as well for freshman Leslie Flaherty, who will be the one returning outfielder. They also have Kylie Flaherty on this roster, Mary McGrath. Tons of talent, top to bottom, and a lot of young players. But now that they had this full season under their belts and getting some experience, I think they're in perfect position to make it run for the GMC title in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. And recapping all of that, it's very rare to see a Metuchen team in the red and the white division, but not only do that, but succeed, with this incredible 16-7 record. And when we talked about these games in the past, we're talking margins like 10-run games, 20-run games, where they just obliterate their opponents. And that's incredible to see from this Metuchen team. And as you said, they are losing some experience, but I think those holes are definitely going to be able to be filled. We see a very decorated underclass here with you said Kozo and De La Fuente and Flaherty. These are incredible numbers they're putting up. Abby Kozo was getting 30 strikeouts in 3 games. That is almost unheard of, especially for underclassmen like her. So shifting gears to the baseball team now, they also had a successful season, but suffered first-round defeats in both the state and county tournaments. How would you assess their season, and what can we see from them in 2022?
Well, it was a solid year. They finished 14-6. Coach Janik did a good job with this team. He had to navigate some pretty significant injuries. Max Kunrich was hurt, Ian McCaskey, Jackson Fenner. Those are all 3 of their main players on the offensive side that missed a lot of time and were out of the lineup for a couple of big games. They finished 11-2 in the GMC Blue Division, which puts them second behind Middlesex, but they did lose in the first round of the GMC tournament. We broadcasted that on the Bulldog Report. That was a tough loss. They blew the lead against North Brunswick, who was a team just 3 days earlier they had beaten handily at home in a regular season contest. That was a tough loss. Then they fell on Wednesday in the CJ Group 2 tournament against Homedale. So not much postseason play for this team. Disappointing for the seniors, but still a great year to be happy about. At the senior awards last night, Coach Danik was saying he was just glad that they got to play 20 games with all the uncertainty, the fact that there was no baseball or softball whatsoever last year. Same goes for any of the other spring sports. To have nearly a full season, a full slate, it was only a couple games fewer than what they would have typically had, and compared to the fall and winter seasons that were abbreviated in some ways for several sports, the fact that spring was able to go through so cleanly and so just calmly, it's really good that we had that. But as for the team themselves, of course, it all goes to Matt Rowe. And the statistics are just like video game numbers here. 30 innings pitched, he only allowed 1 run, and he struck out 60 batters. Luke Schleck, a fellow senior, also pitched well on the mound. He and Jack Barry, who's heading to Middlesex County College as a commit in the fall. I mean, both of them, they did really well on offense. Now, the question is, a lot of seniors departing. You've got 5 significant seniors who are regularly in the lineup that are going to have to be filled in 2022. As for the offensive side, look towards A.J. Perillo, Alex Wood, both staples in the lineup, batting at the top of the order this season. Both did really well. Alex Wood has played a great center field. Perillo has been primarily a DH. Expect him to fill a defensive position next year. As for pitching, actually, one other person I wanted to mention was Joseph Fenton. Freshman shortstop, played really well defensively. He's going to want to pick things up a little bit with the bat, but of course, as a freshman, really strong showing in his first year on the varsity level, replacing Jay Harry. But pitching-wise, that's where the concern lies, because you lose Schleck, you lose Rowe. Those were your top 2 pitchers this season. Benjamin Norwood, Marcus Malloig, both showed signs of greatness, but were a little streaky and struggled in some of the big games. So you're going to hope that both of them can take the next step heading into next season. But overall, I think it was a good year, and the baseball team, they're just happy they got to play as many games as they did.
Absolutely. And, despite having a rough last 3 games, we're talking 5-1 loss, 21-0 loss, and a 3-2 loss against North Brunswick. This team has persevered through it all. They lost last year, plagued with injuries. Now they're losing more seniors. But despite all that, they had a great winning record. They're sending 2 players off to college to play ball. And they just had so much experience on this team. You have to hand it to the coach here. There's really not much else he could have done. And to get these numbers after all of that has happened is fantastic. But I do have to agree with you that the pitching is going to be an issue. We've seen Norwood and Malamud get experience this year, but it needs to be better if they're going to really fill the shoes of, Matt Rowe and Luke Schleck, which, as we know, are the superstars of this team. But despite all that, despite all their challenges, I think the baseball team has a lot to be proud of this year in terms of just showing up and doing incredibly well over their last few games.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a little here to the track team. You guys have the busy 3 weeks coming up, sectionals, groups, and the meet of champions. Of course, there's always a lot of excitement surrounding there. So looking at the boys and the girls, what teams do we have to look for heading into these last couple of weeks here of some significant competition?
So for the few teams, we definitely have to look at the boys 4x4 and their 4x8 teams. I think those are definitely going to be the ones to watch. They have consistently performed incredibly well at the GMC meets, both the relays and the individual meets. So I think they definitely have a shot. If they get it together, I think they could move on to the group meet. Now, in terms of girls, there are competitors such as Lucy Lee and Paige Larson at pole vault. We have Lily Oldhamu at discus and shot, who actually won her GMC meet. So that's definitely something to look out for. But yeah, this sectional meet, this Friday, Saturday, is also going to be possibly the last meet for a lot of these seniors. And, a lot of guys are working hard right now over this past week, these past 2 weeks, really just refining everything to get to that last competition, because you have to leave everything out on that track or out on that field if you're a thrower, because you probably are not going to get an opportunity after this. So it's really important, this last meet. And as of with the baseball team, we lost our season last year. That definitely did cause a hiccup in the development of a lot of kids. Especially Brandon Sinclair definitely felt that as he was a rising freshman in the 800 meter. but it's really great to see how committed everybody was going into this year, all the way back in the winter when we were shoveling, 20 inches of snow off the track or running in the freezing cold. It was incredibly easy for especially these seniors to just, give up. A lot of them are not running in college. They could have just said, well, we lost our season. We're not having the full season for spring. What does it matter? But I think the fact that so many kids came back after losing last year really speaks volumes about how mature this team is and how disciplined and committed they are. And also, it's a huge testament to Mr. Haller and Mr. Thomas, how they're able to motivate and instill, all this incredible work ethic in their kids.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's really what the track team is all about, the work ethic. And you mentioned all of these seniors that will be departing. I feel like if you just pull over 3 seniors in our graduating class, at least one of them you'll just, out of random, he's a track kid, she's a track girl. I mean, there's so many kids on the track team. There's going to be so many departing, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of young talent. Brendan Sinclair is just one on the boys. There's certainly a lot of girls in the underclasses that are really strong as well. And we've talked about it for the last 4 years. This program has the tradition. It's a generational program. It just goes one by one by one. The next group, they'll just rise up and be just like the previous group, and this track team just continues to withstand year in and year out.
Absolutely, Eddie. It feels like we have to say the same thing year in, year out for this track team, but, we get to say great things every single year, so not much to complain about there. So what else is happening in MHS sports?
Well, first thing, I really want to give a big shout out to the boys golf team. They actually captured the GMC championship and finished runner-up in group play. I mean, this was an outstanding year for Coach Stoner's bunch, and it was really led by their senior, Nico Malamud. Last night at the Senior Awards, Coach Stoner said a lot of touching things about how committed Nico Malamud has been and just how unbelievable his career performance has been throughout 4 years, even when he was just a freshman. Back when I was on the golf team and I wasn't very good, Nico was very good, and he was actually playing in the matches, because for people unfamiliar with golf, there's maybe 25, 30 kids on the team. Only at the max 7 actually participate in the competitions, actually play in the matches. So it's really amazing that he broke into the rotation as a freshman and has stayed there through his senior year. Even though he'll be leaving though, I think this team has a lot to be excited about going forwards. They're still going to have Joshua and Kyle Blum along with Matt DeSerbo, who will all be seniors next year. Should be another good season for them. As for the girls, they finished 6-4 overall. They were led by 2 seniors. One of them was Sophie DeCoit, who won all county honors. She also placed 9th in the GMC tournament. Stella Weitzner, she received her 2nd All-Division award. She also won it back in 2019, and she was a substantial contributor as well. And then finally, with the boys tennis team, they had a really good year. They finished the regular season 12-4. They had a 10-3 clip in the GMC Blue Division. I feel like they exceeded expectations a little bit, especially since they have a young team. They advanced to the semifinals in the NJSIAA Central Jersey Group 1 tourney. They fell to Point Pleasant Beach, but they were led by several underclassmen who will be returning, including Ricard Halverson, Anish Singh, and Ashvin Trahan, who were among their standout performers.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a great year for both of these sports, but not only these, but for basically the entirety of MHS sports this year. You saw a lot of incredible honors and awards for this team. And going back to Nico Malamud, you're talking about the Senior Sports Awards last night. I think he spent at least 30 seconds just listing off every single accolade that this guy has accomplished. And it's incredible to see this graduating class and how much they have accomplished despite losing a year of their play. Definitely going to be missed next year by the golf team. And yeah, like you said with the boys tennis team, it's just an incredible record. Mr. Thomas has a lot to be proud of with this boys tennis team. Sorry, getting the incredible sports at Metuchen High School mixed up yet again. But yeah, I mean, there's not really much more you could ask for with this boys tennis team. They just continue to surprise us and continue to surpass every expectation we put on them.
Well, that's going to wrap up our sports segment. I mean, we've been doing this, well, Dylan Manford used to do this with me freshman year, but we've been doing this for the past 3 years, even when you yourself have been playing sports all 3 seasons. And of course, we've already alluded to it. We broadcasted a ton of basketball games together over the past 4 years. I'm curious, what are some of your best memories from these last few years covering sports at Metuchen High School?
Covering sports, that's a great question. I think definitely some of the best memories are just interviewing the coaches, finding out their thought processes, their views on the sports, as some of them have been coaching for 10, 20, 30 years even. So it's really interesting to get that perspective, from a coaching standpoint, from experience standpoint. So that's definitely a great thing. You know, we interviewed Holler a couple of times. We've interviewed, I think, Coach Albanese of the boys varsity soccer team, Kegel, and how he was able to basically turn this wrestling program around. Those were great. I think probably my favorite thing was definitely the basketball games. Those were a lot of fun. I remember when we were, you know, dodging out of bounds balls, you know, at the corner of the basketball court on that little folding table, and now we're in the athletic director's office with the high production, you know, screens everywhere. And I think watching the boys win their sectional title, I believe, was really incredible to see, because it felt like we were kind of right there with them every single step of the way, you know, broadcasting those games, seeing the players and how they change and develop, and just seeing them just go through so much over the last year, like every other sports team, and, you know, come out on top. I think that was just a great thing to see, great thing to be a part of, and a great thing to feel.
Yeah, and it's very similar with me too. Like for the soccer team, well, you were down there on the field, but I got to broadcast that sectional championship game, and getting to be there on the call to see these boys and see how excited everybody was, and also, you know, over the last 4 years, and it's just the progression that we've been able to make with the broadcast, just like all of this, and of course, a lot of this goes to Ben Solasky, who's right here right now. He's actually helping us record this last podcast. The Media Club has really helped us out in helping to enhance the equipment. As we've already talked about many times, freshman year, it was a little different. We were running wires that were tripping people over into the training office, calling some number to try to get the games on the TuneIn radio app. Now we're on YouTube. It's so much better, and we're in the athletic director's office. We're not getting hit by basketballs. We never actually got like a cleaned out by a basketball.
We were close.
We were close.
Very
a couple
close.
Of times.
A lot of expensive equipment in there that you really don't want
Yeah.
swept off the table in one hit.
Yeah, but we stay pretty safe. But it's been really nice getting to cover Metuchen High School sports here for the last few years. And just like everything else, it will be continuing, albeit with some different people. But it's been an honor for the two of us to get to call and cover these sports teams since our freshman year. But we're going to move on now to our final segment of the day, as we will be interviewing the outgoing principal, Bruce Peragallo. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
And this is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. Well, it's time for me and Josh's final interview here on the MHS Podcast. Crazy to think 4 years later, but it'll be very different here next year at Metuchen High School when the school will have a new principal. So it's perfect for Josh and I to cap off our final time co-hosting the MHS Podcast by interviewing MHS's outgoing principal, Mr. Bruce Peragallo. Thank you for being here.
Eddie and Josh, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure being on the podcast.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about, like, your process to becoming principal. So how did that opportunity first present itself?
The opportunity came up back in the summer of 2006. I got a call from John Novak, who at that time was the sitting principal, and they were going through the process of interviewing for an assistant principal. So I interviewed at that time, and I did not get the job that first time around for the assistant principal position. And then the job opened up again, the assistant principal's position opened up again in 2000, for the 2007-2008 school year. And that summer I was fortunate enough to be named assistant principal and John was sole principal at that time. So that was the interview process, and that's how I went about it. Ironically, back in 1985 through 89, I had taught here at Metuchen High School. And interestingly, a number of the students that are in school right now, I had their parents as well. So I was familiar with Metuchen High School. I was familiar with the way the school ran, and particularly Mr. Novak's leadership style, which really I was very impressed with, and really jumped at the opportunity to work with him as an assistant principal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have a lot of history here at Metuchen High School. You've seen a lot of students come and go. You've seen the great changes it's come and gone to this school. So with that in mind, what have you enjoyed most about your time here as principal of MHS?
You know, Josh, I think, kind of piggybacking on what you just said, just the achievements of, funny to say, but the building, the community, and most importantly, our students. How our students have grown and, number one, have become a part of the community and have graduated on to successful careers beyond their college years. And even those students that decide to take a different path, kind of, you know, wrapping myself up into their successes as well. It's always nice when students come back and they tell you that you've had a small part of their success and their growth, and that to me is always very rewarding. But I have seen an awful lot that has happened here in Metuchen, from my days teaching to my days now as in administration as the building principal. I'm very proud of our accomplishments as a building, as a student body, as a staff, and as a community. So I really appreciated each opportunity that was given to me.
And you know, this year has been so different from any other year, and it's been difficult for us students, difficult for us teachers, but it all boils down to you as well as principal having to oversee this, and all, like we alluded to with Dr. Caputo's interview, the constant changes that were coming, like having students remote, having students in person, having students and teachers having to navigate doing both at the same time. So how has the pandemic affected your duties over this past year and a half, and what have been some of the new challenges that you've faced as principal?
You know, I think just that, I mean, just the idea that every day is a little bit different. It's a new challenge as to maybe having some new or different students in the building, to opening up our hybrid program, to allowing the A-week students to be in with the B-week students, and then when we allowed our remote students to come back in. But for 11 years prior to this, I kind of had my system in place as to what needed to happen in the building. And, you know, after a little while, I don't like using this word, but I think it fits, you know, things became a little bit routine. Well, there was nothing routine over the last 14 months. So no matter what decision you made, no matter what you decide to do differently, it was scrutinized at a lot of different levels. And you just prayed that it was the right decision in the end. And I like to think that we've navigated this fairly well over the course of the last 14 or 15 months. And I think we've been successful with everything that's gone on. And to Dr. Caputo's credit, keeping the schools open. I think that, you know, it was met with a lot of challenges and a lot of concerns, but I like to think that our learning loss and so on isn't as severe in this district as it might be in some other districts. So I have to tip my hat to Dr. Caputo and the Board of Education for allowing that to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen a lot of things, you know, we've had to do differently around here over the last year. A lot of changes had to be made, a lot of adjustments, a lot of new things. But one more question. What will you miss most about Metuchen High School now that you're moving on?
Yeah, I'm going to miss, without a doubt, the people. You know, whether it be our amazing teaching staff or whether it be our outstanding students and what they've done, what they've accomplished. I've always enjoyed walking the hallways and seeing the instruction that's taking place in the hallways and the engagement of our teachers and students. And I'll miss our after-school activities, our co-curricular programs, our interscholastic sports, just the involvement, you know, our band and how strong as our music program is right now. So I like to think I had a little something to do with that, and those are the kinds of things that I'm going to certainly miss moving forward. But I like to think I left the building in a better place than when I came here, and I think if that's the case, then I think it's been a good 12-year run.
Well, absolutely. And Mr. Peragallo, we really appreciate your support over these past 4 years in the Metuchen High School podcast and for joining us on occasion here as a guest.
Well, I'm going to steal a couple minutes right now because I want to say to both you guys, and Josh, I was remiss by not thanking you the other night at senior night for all that you've done for the podcast and working with Eddie over your time here, because I appreciate your commentary, adding your color in our interscholastic sports and so on and so forth. But this podcast has really helped to make us a real voice in the community and certainly in the county as well. I mean, I've had an awful lot of other schools and principals comment on the podcast when they're able to tune in and to see it, and the professionalism of what you have done and have created here. So I want to thank you, congratulate each of you as you move on to post-secondary, careers. You have made this place better, and I want to thank you for that. And Ben, I don't want to leave you out either for all of your hard work with your production and so on and so forth. And I know you've got another couple of years here, so we're looking forward to everything that can happen with our media club under your guidance. So, gentlemen, thank you as the high school principal for being the two people that you are and what you've added to this school and this community. And our students are better off because of it.
Well,
I want you to know that.
And we absolutely appreciate that. And we're really glad that we've been able to expand this media program a bit, the fact that the podcast will continue next year, and that we're going to still be able to keep this going, continue to shine light on what else is going on in the Metuchen High School community. And I think, Josh, we could agree here, this is one of the great values of the podcast as well, the fact that we've been able to bring attention when we've spotlighted clubs, other events, things that kind of get buried sometimes and people don't really know about, and we kind of gave an outlet for those people to let their voice be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only has this club grown out over the past 4 years, I think we've definitely helped other people grow as well, whether it be the clubs we spotlight, the athletes and coaches we interview, or the basketball games we broadcast for the people who can't be there, especially over the last year. I think this podcast has become a lot more than I could have ever imagined under your guidance, and of course your help as well. And that's just something I would be forever grateful for when I graduate and when I move on.
Well, thank you for that. And I think what you just said is so important. We have many clubs that sadly kind of fly under the radar and really aren't highlighted the way that they should be, but they are an important part of the building. I really feel that what goes on in the classroom is extremely important, but what happens after school through the club program, through the interscholastic program, through our music program, just kind of helps to round out our students. And I think we're evident that's happened. I mean, just one last piece of data, statistics, is usually in the fall, I'm up over 350 participants in our co-curricular program, our band program, our interscholastic program, and for a long time that was over half of the student body that was involved in something after school. And I think that says a lot. And I want to thank you for bringing all those programs to the forefront. Appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate those words, and we want to once again congratulate you on your retirement, and thank you for all your times here on the MHS Podcast.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate it, and appreciate all of your hard work and what you're doing.
All right, so we'll move on now to the end of this show, our final show here on the podcast. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
This is the MHS Podcast, the online voice of Metuchen High School. Well, after 4 years, that's going to do it here on the MHS Podcast. It's been great to bring it to you. Of course, first, I do have to go through some thank yous. First off to our advisor, Ms. Wisniewski, for helping us out over these past 4 years. We're really appreciative of all the work that she has done. Ms. Glave, who has since retired but was the librarian for my first 3 years here, we really were grateful that she provided a space in the back of the library where we would record the podcast before the pandemic. As well as all of our past members, Dylan Manfrey, Sarah Terracina, Ayana Tasham, and then our current members, Julia Hirschfield, Joe Stivich, and Itai Geller. I really appreciate all the help that they've given us throughout this past year. And in some ways, I kind of got to thank Zoom as well, because we've been able to continue the podcast in a video version over the past year, something that I never really saw coming when we started this as freshmen. But we're really glad it's going to be continuing next year with Itai Geller, Marcus Young, Ike Busch, and hopefully a few others. But we're glad that the podcast will be something that will last beyond me and Josh's graduation next Tuesday. But of course, I got to give a big thank you to the man himself right here, Josh Hyman. And well, a little backstory. So when I started this club, of course there were no members, it was just me. And they told me to try to get some members. I'd sit at a table in the cafeteria during lunch and put up a little sign to promote the club. And nobody came over except for one kid. His name was Josh Hyman, and he was like, my mom wants me to join a club, and this one sounds interesting, so I'll do it. Are you glad you did it?
I am absolutely glad I joined this club. I mean, I could have never expected to do a lot of the things we've done on the show, whether it be broadcasting the games, interviewing some very special guests, or just, you know, becoming a part of this high school that I just never really thought about, you know. So in that sense, yeah, I absolutely do not regret a thing joining this club at all.
Yeah, it's been really great to do some of these things. You've mentioned, we talked about earlier in the sports segment about getting to do the basketball games, but also all the interviews and segments that we've gotten to do here. And honestly, I was trying to think of a few of my favorites. One of them that you always bring up, when I got the interim president of NASCAR, Brent DeWar, freshman year.
Yeah, that was insane. I remember I was doing a show with you and I think Julie and Osa when we were talking about the Star Wars and stuff like that. And you know, you always do the regular bit where like, when we come back, we're interviewing, and then you say the name of the person, and you said, the president of NASCAR, and Julie and I just looked at each other like, what? How did he get the president of NASCAR on the school podcast? That's crazy. What other high schools do you know can do something like that? That's insane. So when I talk about just things that are completely unexpected that I've gotten to do there, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So it's just incredible stuff that you just wouldn't really be able to do if you don't, you know, step out of your comfort zone a bit and try something new.
Yeah, Twitter DMs go a long way to people out there. That's how that happened. But a lot of the great interviews that we've gotten to do, I've also, you know, as people who know me, I've gone to the Bruce Beck Sports Broadcasting Camp for the last few years. I've had Bruce back on. I've had Mike Quick, my teacher, on a couple of times before to talk about broadcasting in high school sports. Other segments I remember, the one time we had Tyron Ross on to talk about some of the greatest athletes in MHS history. Also, we had a really good conversation last year with Mr. Ross and Ms. Vollison about race in America last May, kind of highlighting everything at the same time as the George Floyd incident and continued protests regarding systematic racial injustice were going on. And then I also remember one, I don't remember exactly the context, but we listened to some weird ASMR and had to check our reactions to them.
Yeah, we did a segment on like ASMR and the way people use to relax and de-stress. And you said, hey Josh, we should, you know, listen to some ASMR, give a blind reaction to it. I remember, not for me, definitely. I don't really find comfort in other people's sounds and stuff like that. Definitely an interesting way to relax, but yeah, that was an interesting segment we did. I remember that.
So of course, I had to dive into the depths of our YouTube channel. Always fun going back and seeing something you did 4 years ago.
That is very debatable, I must say.
So I found the beginning of the first podcast with me, and then the first one with Josh, where he did the announcement. Let's first try to embarrass me and see how scary and young I sounded freshman year.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for the first ever edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, right here on the MHS Pawdcast, the radio voice of Metuchen High School. I'm your host, Kalegi. On the show, it'll be a weekly show and we'll talk sports, news, and all things MHS.
Well, that was something. But
That wasn't that bad.
okay, but let's go to the other thing where we have Josh Hyman.
You're going to humiliate me.
It's not going to be too bad. Okay, here we go. That's fine.
I'm just saying that to make me feel better, Eddie.
All right. Let's
hear it. Let's hear it.
Many guests, but first, let's send it to our brand new contributor and co-host of the MHS Podcast. Now reading some school announcements, here is Josh Hyman. Josh, take it away. So first, Metuchen High School has announced its second ever Hall of
That's
Fame
not too
class.
bad.
This
Okay.
year's inductees
I thought it was going to be
magician David Copperfield,
You know.
Mildred B. Moss, the person who Moss School is named after, former Superintendent Teresa Sinatra, and Bernard Spinger,
Okay, that's
who
not
work in
too
the
bad.
broadcast.
Yeah,
All right. I don't feel as terrible as I did a few minutes ago.
I mean,
You told me what it was.
I mean, how young did you think we were like, I'm Josh Hyman.
No, it's that plus like maybe stuttery or something like that. This isn't too bad.
Genesis. And finally, remember to go and see the Footlighters present She Kills Monsters. This is Metuchen High School's full play. Showings will be Thursday, November 30th, Friday, December 1st, and Saturday, December 2nd at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10 in advance and $12 at the door.
Cool announcements in the background.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. But yeah, good to take a little deep dive, and those are all still existing on our YouTube channel if you want
So
to
you
cover further.
can find us and embarrass us even further.
Yeah, but you know what? It wasn't terrible, but we both got a lot better, and we all
Yeah.
made each other better, and it's really great that we've gotten to do this over these past few years.
Now, a great thing to try and do is find the very early basketball broadcasts. That's going to be an interesting one to review there, because as you know, our broadcasting capabilities have really improved over the last few years, and those early ones were kind of rough, you could say.
There's one specific thing I remember where it was a game against Denellen, and right at the beginning, you said Metuchen's going to have a tough time trying to stop Dunellen.
Dunellen, yeah. Or I remember, I think our call gave out in the middle of the game. You were frantically trying to text us, call us number what, Indiana or something. And I remember the wires running through the corridors into the trainer's office. I remember that big console or whatever it was for the microphones. It was a very complicated setup, but fortunately now with a lot of the grants and a lot of the help we've gotten from teachers, we're able to have a much more streamlined, professional setup in the athletic director's office.
Yeah, and also a big thank you, Mr. Caputo, of course, the AD, as well as Ben Solasky, who's helping us with this last show. He's got the cameras set up. He found a good spot for us, the library, and then the coach's office for what we're shooting today. And we really appreciate his help and the rest of the media club for kind of partnering and doing the Bulldog Report to broadcast games. And though me and Josh will be gone, things will continue. We're still going to have the podcast. We still have some new members that are coming in and are ready to take the reins and continue this show. But for me and Josh, this is going to be it. Josh, anything left to say?
I mean, not really. I'm just really amazed that we were able to do this for 4 years, and all the changes we made, the improvements we've gotten. A lot of students really appreciate what we're doing here, and we've really become kind of part of the community, especially over the last year, where this was a really big source of information and basketball games and stuff like that for a lot of kids. And I'm really glad that there are kids in the younger grades that are interested in this stuff, so future grades can have this sort of source of entertainment and information, which is just really great to see.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year, but hopefully things will be more normal in the fall. And I am planning, I'm not going too far away, I'm going to Rutgers, that hopefully I can come back and broadcast a couple of basketball games in the winter during my winter break. But that's going to be it for my time and Josh's time on the podcast. We hope everybody has a great summer, and of course, congratulations to the class of 2021. But I'm Kalegi.
And I'm Josh Hyman.
And this was the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online radio voice of MHS. Have a great summer.